Hi, I'm Sandy. For the past few years, I have been hiking in many different places, mostly in western part of China, and documenting my journey here on this channel. After I posted my last video about trekking in Yunnan, I've got way more questions than I expected, which makes me really happy. It also made me realize that there are still much more that I haven't talked about it yet, so I thought I'll just make a Q&A video. I want to start with this question: how long does it take to acclimatize, and what are some ways to cope with it? The mountains in China are really different than other places. Let me paint a big picture here first. China's topography is divided into 3 steppes. Places like Tibet, Western Sichuan, and Northwest Yunnan are basically located on the first step, which is the highest. So Yunnan has a more friendly average altitude and is much more accessible, so you can acclimatize for a few days first in a relatively low altitude cities like Kunming or Lijiang before going to the mountains. Trust me, hiking at high altitude feels nothing like hiking at sea level, so this is definitely something you need to take seriously. Now the question is, if this is your first time hiking at high altitude, how do you know how your body will react? You may think that being fit means you'll do better, but that's not always true. Sometimes people with a lot of muscles actually struggle more because their body consumes more oxygen. What matters more is your cardio fitness and how efficiently your body uses oxygen. For example, like runners and swimmers, they tend to adapt better over time. When I first started high altitude trekking like 3 years ago in Western Sichuan, I actually didn't get very severe high altitude sickness at the beginning, probably because I was thin at that time and my body didn't consume a lot of oxygen. But my fitness was terrible at that time. So after a full day of hiking, I got drained out. I was exhausted. So eventually the low blood sugar triggered altitude sickness. About a year ago, I started training more consistently, gym workouts plus cardio. Since then, I think I have adapted to altitude much faster and felt way better on hikes. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of myself because of that. If anyone's interested, I could make another video talking about how I train for high altitude trekking. I also wanted to share a few things that personally helped me deal with high altitude sickness. Some people recommend taking diet marks beforehand, but for me, I honestly didn't notice any difference, so I'm not gonna give any medical recommendations here. But if I have headaches, I will take ibuprofen and it usually helps. But I think more importantly, sleep well, get enough rest, don't push yourself too hard on the first few days, and stay hydrated. For me, I would bring a bottle of hot water with me during hikes because it's usually cold up there in the mountains. Also drink Coke or 葡萄糖. I don't know the English name for it, but I'll just put it here. A lot of the transportation and accommodation questions were specifically about Yubeng, like how to get to the trailhead, how do you arrange transport back to Shangri-La, where can I find bus information. So for most people, you'll first arrive in major cities like Lijiang or Shangri-La by plane or high-speed train. From there, you can take the buses to the trekking areas. You can buy tickets directly at the station, but if you can read some Chinese and use WeChat Pay, there's actually a really convenient WeChat mini program for booking buses. So for Yubeng specifically, most people go Shangri-La, then Feilai Temple, and then to Ninon village. I'd recommend staying one night at Feilai Temple so you can watch the sunrise over Meili Snow Mountain the next morning, then heading to Ninon to start the hike. Or you can ask your hotel to arrange a driver to pick you up. When I went there last year, because I was staying somewhere a bit far away from Feilai Temple, I asked my hotel to arrange a car directly to the trailhead after I watched the sunrise, and it cost me around 150 RMB. how did you like all of the accommodations you stay in, and if you have any recommendations. So there's Upper Yubeng Village and there's Lower Yubeng Village. So I booked the hotels on trip.com app 1 or 2 days in advance, but I think you can also ask on the spot if they have rooms available. There are actually a lot of guest houses in the village, but in general, Lower Yubeng tends to be more expensive. Upper Yubeng is usually cheaper, quieter, and has better mountain views. On my first night, I stayed at Weima Pichai in Upper Yubeng. The rooms faced the snow mountains. They also have a restaurant, and they had so many cats. The next day, I actually took a rest day because I got my period right before hiking in. So I spent the afternoon at Unknown Flying Bistro, just chilling with tea and dogs. Then on my second night, I stayed at a hostel that's closer to the Glacier Lake trailhead called 行者山社. There's a popular restaurant right across where you can have breakfast and dinner. The third night, I stayed at 直语新社 in Lower Yubeng. The room was Tibetan style and had underfloor heating and hot water. There was a large terrace outside with views of the snow-capped mountains. However, there was some construction noise nearby in the morning, which was quite disturbing. And one place I really loved was called Shanye Bistro. They have books and handmade crafts, really cozy vibes. If you have extra time in Yubeng, I strongly recommend spend perhaps an afternoon there, just chilling. By the way, there's a way to get a free dinner at this bistro, which I'll talk about later, so stick around if you're interested. What time of the year did you go and how'd you like it? Now, come to think of it, I have only hiked in Yunnan in December and January, which is the winter season. Winter in Yunnan is usually stable, lots of sunny days, not too cold. The best timing is fresh snow on the mountains without the trails being completely buried. Autumn is also beautiful, which is from September to October, November. But please avoid Chinese public holidays if possible. Even remote mountain village can get very crowded. How do you pack your luggage? So this is what I packed for hiking Yubeng in winter. Can foreigners trek solo to Yubeng like you? Or do you recommend joining a tour group? Do you have any recommended tours or guide? For Tiger Living Gorge and Yubeng Village, I do think that it's possible to do it solo. The trail is pretty obvious, but if you think it's too much trouble dealing with transportation, booking hotels with a language barrier, or if it's your first time in China or your first time trekking at a high altitude, joining a group can make things a lot easier, obviously. Wonder China is currently organizing trekking trips to Lijiang and Shangri-La this September and October, including both Tiger Living Gorge and Yubeng. And what I really like about their itinerary is that you'd get time to properly adjust to the altitude. So you first acclimatize in Lijiang, then do Tiger Living Gorge, then go higher to Shangri-La before hiking to Yubeng. They also included things like watching sunrise at Feilai Temple, visiting local markets and ancient towns, trying Tibetan food and wine, and apparently there's even a cooking class that you can choose to experience with a local Nasi family, which honestly sounds so fun. If it's your first time visiting Yunnan, it really covers everything you need to experience and travel like a local. Check out the link in the description below for more information if you're interested. If you book the tour using my code GOSANDY, you'll get a free dinner at Shanye Bistro, which is the bistro I mentioned earlier. It's such a cute place. I really wish I can go back again. A lot of you guys are also very interested in the Heart of Kawagebo trek. I still think it's one of the most beautiful treks I have ever done in Yunnan. But if I'm being honest, the weather matters a lot if you decide to do this trek, because the highlight of the trek is on day 3, when you reach the top of Bengeding and you'll be surrounded by snow peaks. So if the weather is cloudy or snowy the whole time, you might miss a lot of the views. Also, no one asked about this, but there are 2 books about Shangri-La that I really want to recommend. The first one is Lost Horizon by James Hilton, which is actually where the idea of Shangri-La originally came from. It's a novel from the 1930s about a hidden paradise somewhere in the mountains near Tibet. It's fictional, but I feel like it kind of shaped how lots of people nowadays imagine this area. The book was actually inspired by Joseph Rock. He was an Australian American explorer, botanist, and geographer who traveled extensively through northwest Yunnan and the Tibet border regions in the early 20th century. Second one is a Japanese book called Meili Snow Mountain by Naori Kobayashi. This book is connected to a real tragedy that happened in 1991 when a joint Chinese-Japanese mountaineering team attempted to summit Kawagebo, the highest peak of Meili Snow Mountain. 17 climbers were caught in an avalanche and all lost their lives. It became one of the most deadliest mountaineering disasters in history. To this day, Kawagebo remains officially unclimbed. The book follows Kobayashi's years-long journey of searching the traces of his lost friends, but it's also much more than that. It documents the mysterious atmospheres around the Meili Snow Mountain, the simple daily life of people beneath living it, also his 3 pilgrimage journey around the mountains, and how the region slowly changed over time. I wish I had read this book before I did the Heart of Kawagebo trek. Because I think I would have understood the mountains on a much deeper level. There's this deep sense of respect towards the mountains there. Local Tibetans don't really see Mount Kawagebo as a mountain to conquer. Unfortunately, I don't think there's an English translation yet, but I think you can actually find a Chinese version in some cafes or bookstores in Shangri-La or Yubeng. Okay, I think these are pretty much all of the questions that I've received. If there's anything that I still didn't cover, please feel free to leave a comment. I will do my best to reply. Hopefully this video will give you a much clearer idea of what trekking in Yunnan is actually like. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the mountains. Bye.